What happens when country music royalty meets daytime television drama and everything goes horribly wrong? Well, buckle up because what I'm about to tell you will leave you speechless. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're going to want to discuss this one with everyone. The morning started like any other at the Today with Jenna and Friends studio. The bright lights were perfectly positioned, the cameras were rolling, and the audience was buzzing with excitement. Reba McEntire, the queen of country music herself, was scheduled for what everyone assumed would be a typical promotional interview. She was there to talk about her latest album, her upcoming tours, and maybe share a few heartwarming stories from her decades in the spotlight. Jenna, the show's energetic host, had prepared her usual lineup of questions. She'd done this thousands of times before with countless celebrities, and today seemed no different. The producers had briefed her on Reba's recent projects, her philanthropic work, and even some light personal topics that would make for good television. Everything was set for what should have been a pleasant, feel-good segment that viewers would enjoy with their morning coffee. But sometimes, television has other plans. As Reba walked onto the set, she looked every bit the superstar she's always been. Dressed in a stunning burgundy blazer with her signature red hair, perfectly styled, she waved to the audience with that famous smile that has charmed millions of fans worldwide. The crowd erupted in applause, clearly thrilled to see one of their favorite entertainers up close. Jenna stood up from behind her desk, arms extended for the customary hug that kicks off every guest appearance. "Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the incomparable Reba McEntire," Jenna announced, her voice carrying that practiced enthusiasm that daytime hosts perfect over years of experience. The two women embraced briefly, exchanging pleasantries that the microphones couldn't quite pick up before settling into their respective seats. "Reba, it is such an honor to have you here today," Jenna began, shuffling through her note cards with a practiced smile. "I have to say, you look absolutely stunning, and I know our viewers are dying to hear about everything you've been working on lately." Reba adjusted herself in the plush interview chair, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap. "Well, thank you for having me, Jenna. It's always nice to be here and connect with the fans." The first few minutes proceeded exactly as everyone expected. They talked about Reba's latest album, the inspiration behind some of her new songs, and her thoughts on how country music has evolved over the years. Reba was charming, articulate, and generous with her stories, just as she'd been in hundreds of interviews before. The audience hung on every word, laughing at her jokes and nodding along as she shared insights about her creative process. "Now, I have to ask," Jenna said, leaning forward slightly with that conspiratorial tone that suggests something juicy is coming. "You've been in this business for what, over 40 years now? You must have seen some incredible changes, not just in the music industry, but in how women are treated in entertainment." Reba nodded thoughtfully. "Oh, absolutely. When I started out, things were very different. Women had to fight twice as hard for half the recognition, and that's just the truth of it. But I've always believed in speaking up for what's right and not backing down when something matters. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about," Jenna continued. And there was something in her tone that made Reba's expression shift slightly, because recently there have been some conversations about older artists, particularly women, and whether they should gracefully step aside to make room for younger talent. "I'm curious about your thoughts on that." The studio seemed to grow quieter, though the cameras kept rolling. Reba's smile became more measured, more careful. "Well, that's an interesting way to phrase it. Jenna, are you asking me if I think I should retire?" "Not necessarily retire," Jenna backpedaled, but there was something in her persistence that suggested she wasn't entirely backing down. "But don't you think there's something to be said for knowing when your time has passed? I mean, you're 68 years old. At what point does holding on to the spotlight become more about ego than artistry?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Reba's posture straightened, and those who knew her well might have recognized the subtle shift in her demeanor. Her smile remained, but it had taken on a different quality entirely, one that suggested the pleasant facade was beginning to crack. "I'm sorry, but did you just suggest that my continued career is about ego?" Reba's voice maintained its sweetness, but there was steel underneath now. "Because I have to tell you, that's not only insulting, it's completely off base." Jenna seemed to realize she'd struck a nerve, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I'm just saying that maybe there's a conversation to be had about making space for the next generation. Younger artists are struggling to get airplay, to get recognition. And when established artists like yourself continue to dominate, it makes it harder for fresh voices to be heard. Fresh voices, Reba repeated, and now her tone had shifted completely. The warmth was gone, replaced by something much sharper. Jenna, I need you to understand something. I've earned every bit of success I've had through decades of hard work, talent, and dedication. I didn't get where I am because someone handed it to me, and I'm certainly not going to step aside because you or anyone else thinks I've outlived my usefulness. The tension in the studio was now palpable. You could see the producers behind the cameras starting to shift uncomfortably, sensing that their routine interview had taken a very unexpected turn. But Jenna, perhaps thinking she was creating compelling television, or maybe just caught up in the moment, decided to press even harder. But Reba, surely you can see how your generation of artists, particularly in country music, has had such a long run at the top. Don't you think it's a little selfish to keep taking up space that could go to someone who might need it more? Jenna's tone had that fake concern quality that made the question even more insulting. Reba's eyes flashed with something that anyone who knew her would recognize as genuine anger. She uncrossed her legs and leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. Selfish? Did you just call me selfish for continuing to do the job I love and excel at? For continuing to give fans the music they want to hear? I'm just asking the hard questions that maybe others are afraid to ask, Jenna replied, clearly trying to maintain her composure, but you could tell she was starting to realize she'd gone too far. Your last album didn't exactly light up the charts the way your earlier work did. Maybe that's the market telling you something. That was the moment everything changed. Reba's face went completely still, and when she spoke, her voice carried the kind of authority that had commanded stages for decades. My last album debuted at number 4 on the Billboard Country Chart and number 13 on the Billboard 200. It was certified gold within 6 months. But apparently, you didn't bother to do your research before deciding to ambush me on live television. The audience, which had been quietly uncomfortable during this exchange, began to murmur. Some people were shifting in their seats, clearly sensing that they were witnessing something that wasn't supposed to be happening. This wasn't the light-hearted celebrity chat they'd come to see. Jenna's co-host, Marcus, who had been mostly silent during this exchange, tried to jump in. Ladies, maybe we should talk about Reba's upcoming tour dates. I know the fans would love to hear about that, but Reba wasn't done. No, Marcus, I think we need to finish this conversation. Jenna seems to have some very strong opinions about my career that she wants to share with everyone, so let's hear them all. Jenna realized she was in deep trouble, but instead of apologizing or changing course, she made the fatal mistake of continuing down the same path. Look, I'm not trying to be mean here. I'm just saying that maybe, just maybe, there comes a time when experience should give way to fresh energy. The industry is changing. Streaming has changed everything, and younger artists understand that landscape better. Fresh energy, Reba repeated, and now she was visibly angry. Her southern accent became more pronounced, which anyone from her part of the world would recognize as a danger sign. Let me tell you something about fresh energy, honey. I was innovating in this industry when half these so-called fresh artists were still in diapers. I was breaking barriers for women in country music, fighting for creative control, and building a brand that has lasted through multiple generations of supposed fresh energy. The studio audience was now clearly uncomfortable. Some people were looking around, wondering if they should clap or stay silent. Others were pulling out their phones, sensing that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Jenna's producer was frantically gesturing from behind the cameras, clearly trying to signal that they needed to go to commercial or change topics immediately. But it was too late. The interview had taken on a life of its own. And another thing, Reba continued, her voice rising slightly. This idea that I should step aside gracefully is exactly the kind of ageism and sexism that women in this industry have been fighting against for decades. You would never ask a male artist if he thought he should retire to make room for younger talent. You'd never suggest that his continued success was selfish or ego-driven. Jenna tried to interrupt. That's not what I owe. But it is exactly what you meant. Reba cut her off with a sharpness that made everyone in the studio freeze. You invited me here under the pretense of promoting my work, and instead, you've spent the entire time suggesting that I'm too old, too irrelevant, and too selfish to continue doing what I love. Well, Let me tell you something that might surprise you." She paused for a moment, and the entire studio held its breath. "My tour dates for next year, sold out, every single one. My streaming numbers, growing every quarter. My fan base, it includes everyone from teenagers who discovered me on social media to grandparents who've been with me since the beginning. So your theory about me being out of touch with modern audiences doesn't exactly hold water, does it?" The audience began to clap, and you could tell that sentiment in the room was shifting strongly in Reba's favor. People were nodding along with her words, clearly agreeing that she was being treated unfairly. Marcus tried again to salvage the situation. "Reba, your fans clearly adore you." And I think what Jenna was trying to say, but Reba held up her hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "No, Marcus, I think Jenna has said quite enough. And I think I've heard enough too." She started to remove her microphone, and everyone realized what was about to happen. Jenna, perhaps finally understanding the gravity of her mistake, tried one last desperate attempt to smooth things over. "Reba, please, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I have nothing but respect for your career and your contributions to music. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot." Reba stood up from her chair, microphone now in her hand rather than clipped to her jacket. She looked directly at Jenna with an expression that was equal parts disappointment and anger. "A misunderstanding? No, honey, there's no misunderstanding here. You made your feelings crystal clear, and frankly, so have I." The silence in the studio was deafening. Reba stood there, microphone in hand, staring down at Jenna with the kind of look that could freeze fire. Everyone in that room knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would be replayed and discussed for years to come. "You know what the real problem is here?" Reba continued, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "It's not that I'm too old or too irrelevant. It's that you clearly didn't prepare for this interview beyond reading some outdated talking points that someone handed you. You don't know my recent achievements. You don't understand my current relevance. And you certainly don't respect the legacy I've built." Jenna's face had gone pale. She was clearly realizing that this disaster was going out live to millions of viewers, and there was no taking back what had already been said. "Reba, I sincerely apologize if I offended you. That was never my intention." "Your intention?" Reba's voice rose with incredulity. "Your intention was to embarrass me on national television by suggesting I'm a has-been who's too selfish to step aside. Well, congratulations, because you've certainly made your point clear to everyone watching." The audience was now fully on Reba's side, with several people calling out supportive comments. You could hear someone shout, "We love you, Reba," and another person yelling, "This is wrong." The energy in the room had completely shifted, and it was obvious that Jenna had lost not just her guest, but the entire audience as well. Marcus made one final attempt to save the segment. Maybe we could start over. Fresh slate." Reba turned to look at him, and her expression softened slightly. "Marcus, you seem like a nice man, and I don't have any issue with you. But there's no starting over from this. Some things, once they're said, can't be unsaid." She turned back to Jenna, who was now visibly shaking. "You want to talk about grace and knowing when to step aside? Let me show you what real grace looks like. I'm not going to sit here and continue to be insulted, and I'm certainly not going to pretend that what just happened was acceptable." Reba placed the microphone on the coffee table between them with a decisive click. "I've been in this business long enough to know when I'm being set up, and I'm too old and too wise to sit here and take it with a smile." The cameras kept rolling as Reba gathered her purse from beside her chair. The audience was completely silent now, watching history unfold in real time. You could practically hear everyone holding their breath. "Ladies and gentlemen in the audience," Reba said, turning to face the crowd, "thank you for your kindness and your support. You've been wonderful, and I'm sorry you had to witness this." The audience erupted in applause, many people standing up to show their support. Jenna made one last, desperate attempt. "Reba, please don't leave like this. We can fix this. We can make this right." Reba paused at the edge of the set and turned back one final time. Her voice was steady, dignified, but unmistakably final. "Jenna, some things can't be fixed with a commercial break and a fake apology. You've shown your true colors today, and frankly, they're not very pretty. I've spent 43 years building a career based on respect, hard work, and treating people with dignity. I've never walked off a set before in my entire career, but I've also never been treated with such blatant disrespect by someone who clearly knows nothing about me or my work. The production assistants and crew members were frozen, unsure whether to keep filming or cut to commercial. The show's director was frantically speaking into his headset, probably getting instructions from executives who were watching this unfold in real time. "You want to talk about making space for fresh voices," Reba continued. And now her voice carried the full weight of her decades in the entertainment industry. "Well, here's some free advice from someone who's actually earned her place in this business. Fresh voices earn their space through talent, dedication, and respect for those who came before them. They don't get it by tearing down the women who built the foundation they're standing on." With that, Reba McEntire, one of the most successful and respected artists in country music history, walked off the Today with Jenna and Friends set. The sound of her heels clicking against the studio floor was the only noise in the completely silent room. The cameras continued to roll, capturing Jenna's shocked expression and the stunned faces of the audience members. Marcus sat there looking like he wished he could disappear entirely. The producers behind the cameras were gesturing wildly, clearly trying to figure out how to salvage what was left of the show. As Reba reached the exit, she paused one final time and spoke without turning around. "And for the record, my next album comes out in 6 months. My tour starts in 8 weeks, and every single date is sold out." So much for being irrelevant. The studio door closed behind her with a definitive click, leaving behind a room full of people who knew they'd just witnessed something that would be talked about, analyzed, and replayed for years to come. Jenna sat there, microphone still clipped to her jacket, staring at the empty chair where one of country music's biggest stars had been sitting just moments before. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before Marcus finally found his voice. "Well, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break," but everyone in that studio knew that no commercial break in the world was going to fix what had just happened. Reba McEntire had just delivered one of the most epic, dignified, and completely justified walk-offs in television history. And she'd done it with the kind of class and strength that reminded everyone exactly why she's remained a force in the entertainment industry for over 4 decades. That's the story of how the Queen of Country Music reminded everyone why you should never underestimate experience, wisdom, and the power of knowing your own worth. What do you think about Reba's response? Was she right to walk off, or should she have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.